Ladies and gentlemen, all the way from Dallas, Texas, it's the Yankee Cowboy Podcast with your host, Tim Wilkins, where he talks all things pro wrestling and sports. Let's go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Yankee Cowboy Podcast. Today I'm joined by a great co-host, a longtime friend, Chris. We're going to be talking about a topic that is actually really important coming around the corner here in the next 6 weeks. It is the midterm elections, and can the GOP win back the Senate? Chris, I appreciate you joining me here today. As always like talking to you about some topics. So,
yeah, man, glad to be here. Glad to finally get one on the books.
Yeah, it took us a little while. I mean, our schedules sometimes correlate, sometimes they don't. It's always a good time. But today's episode, we're obviously talking about the GOP. Can they win back the Senate? And I think genuinely we both have that concern, and that's why it's a good topic to talk about. Do you have any races in mind that you want to first focus on in this conversation here? I'll leave it open to you on where we go here, because there's a lot of them out there. Obviously, we can win pretty much every seat if we had to, but the likelihood there's a few out there. So leave it open.
I mean, we won't obviously touch on the safe Republican or safe Democrat races, but I think the three that you have to look at that the media is clearly covering, especially on our favorite news channel, obviously is the Georgia race with the incumbent Warnock and Herschel Walker. Arizona there with Blake Masters and his far left candidate that he's running against. Or sorry, shouldn't say far left. Well, far left, but Mark Kelly, the astronaut. And then Pennsylvania with the incompetent John Fetterman and Dr. Oz. So there's three races that I think are really going to obviously dictate the power of the Senate, and could potentially see how our country moves over the next with the 6-year term.
Well, I think you're forgetting about our good friend down in Florida, Mr. Little Marco, as well as another opportunity for the liberals to kind of squeak on in, because Mr. Little Marco is not exactly the safest right now either in the polling data. But also another one, the Wisconsin race, which our boy, Ron Johnson. Listen, I'll say it. I traveled to Wisconsin. I know you used to travel to Wisconsin for work. Wisconsin's a good place. Has good people on both sides, as our good friend would say back in the day. And I think the first conversation we need to have, I don't know which one you want to go with first, but I think the news that came out this past week before Labor Day was the polling data that came out with Warnock and Herschel Walker. And over the summer, Chris, there was a lot of data of Herschel Walker being down by a lot of points. There was just a lot of data that was showing that Herschel Walker is about to get his, as good old Jim Ross would say. Well, actually Stone Cold said it, not Jim Ross, but open a can of whoop ass and walk the drive. So that wasn't going to happen. So I'm interested to see what would you think about that issue, or that race. Do you think Herschel Walker closes the deal? Does Trump need to come down and campaign really good, or what do we got going on?
I mean, obviously, as we know, the energy of the Republican Party, I will say, and I'll kind of break it into two facets. You got the establishment, and then you got obviously the America First the America First movement, which I believe, while there are some similarities and symmetries with them, I think that there is a little bit of you have your kind of Washington elitist, don't upset the apple cart, but then you have the America First candidates that I think are really going to hopefully continue to move the GOP hopefully in the right direction, especially if we can get these folks seated and potentially look at a new Republican majority leader. But we'll obviously cross that bridge when we get there. But I think Herschel's got a chance. I mean, obviously from a name recognition standpoint, I mean, he is one of the most recognizable names in the state of Georgia. Um, I think the knock on Herschel that I've seen from people is that he's not the most polished speaker. But you're looking at you're looking at basically a country boy from Georgia. Grew up in Georgia and is Georgia born and bred, who can speak to the folks in Georgia. So I mean, I think obviously Trump will play a role no matter what in all these races. I mean, all of his candidates that he's endorsed are the ticket leaders right now. But the question is going to be is what kind of, per se, and I'll say in quotation marks, interference will the establishment run, looking towards the next 60 plus days out. That's my biggest concern, to be honest with you. It's not so much the energy or the way that the America First movement is. My concern is that how much will we kind of cannibalize our own people, going forward, and that's my concern in Georgia. I mean, you
Well,
look at the state.
I think, Chris, not to cut you off here, but I think the main thing is Mitch McConnell said it 3 weeks ago, saying that there was, uh, a candidate's flaws, and I'm like going, they must be talking about Herschel Walker, because Herschel Walker isn't a flawed candidate by the aesthetics, right? Yes, is he a great personal speaker? Like, is he a great orator? I don't think he's going to put you out there for the most enthusiastic speech of all time, but he speaks plainly, and I think you might understand this reference for being in the South as well. Other than Chipper Jones from the Atlanta Braves, Herschel Walker is probably the most well-known guy in Georgia.
Absolutely. Well, add Bill and Chase Elliott in there, and that's basically the face of Georgia sports right there. I really do think that obviously from a name recognition standpoint, from a national environment standpoint, I mean, I think Herschel will win. I mean, it's going to be close. I mean, I'm looking within 2 or 3 points. I think the national environment is going to make a big difference. So, the hope is obviously, we got to look at what's going to happen in Fulton County, what's going to happen in Cobb County, basically those counties around the Atlanta metro area that really, because of obviously the growth of the area, have turned the politics of the state. I mean, Georgia, as you know, was a fairly solid red state, and has continued to move left because of the amount of people that have migrated into the state. I mean, the state hadn't been carried by a Democrat since 1992, so that's obviously a concern, as the populations of the metro area of Atlanta continues to grow. The demographics are really kind of working against Georgia. That's going blue, from purple to, hopefully, knock on wood, does not go blue. When you look at states like Virginia, which obviously this past cycle went red at the governor level and at the attorney general and parts of the state there, and then you look at Colorado, which was a solid red state for a long time and has gone way to the left. So, that's my concern long term is, okay, if we win this cycle, great, but how does the GOP per se stop the bleeding in Georgia, keep the state from eventually becoming that Virginia or Colorado? But that's
a valid point, man. That's a valid point. I think Ronna Romney needs to get her act together on messaging, and that's what I will segue to is, we can watch these candidates do what they're going to do, and I think we talked about this. When is Trump going to get into the action? And he's done a little bit, but I'm talking about like full-blown, like rally after rally, like barnstorm the country to do some of this. And I think, not to say that this raid at Mar-a-Lago, or I'll call it that, that's what it is, has taken some wind out of his sails. I think the GOP is saying, okay, let's take a back door and let's go a little bit differently in a different direction. I think Ronna need to get her act together on messaging, because there's no, okay, if you look at the polling data right now, the 3 fundamental topics that every single voter has been looking for right now is the economy, inflation, and it's been flirting, depending on where your election is at. It's between border security and abortion. Those are the top 4 items.
Well, I think
Now,
crime. I think crime is
well,
supersedes abortion.
well, it's depending on where you are. So, like, if you look at, I think crime universally would be a third, fourth and fifth would probably be abortion and potentially border. I think border security is above abortion, especially in the South here in Texas. I know we don't have. We have, as we like to call, a decent race going on here for governor, but as a good wrestling fan would say, it's going to be about an 8-minute squash, and Greg Abbott's going to be back at the house drinking beer. And so the thing is, unfortunately, we can talk about. I'll talk about this race next, and not to segue into this, but this race reminds me a lot of 2020 all over again with John Fetterman and Dr. Oz. Fetterman's not campaigning because of a health issue. He had a stroke. And Dr. Oz had a very contentious primary. And I want to hear your viewing on this. Is Dr. Oz, I think Trump got the same mentality of when he was going after Biden, for not coming out of his basement. He got negative reactions to it. But in this case, even the local press, I think the Pittsburgh Gazette, I think is the Pittsburgh paper up there talking about it, and they were talking about it as in he's not. Is he pestering them? Yeah, but he's not. He's forcing the issue in a good way, which I think is important for a lot of people. But I want to hear your views on. I mean, I think going back to Georgia, I think you said within 2 or 3 points. I think, like we always talk about between the two of us, as always, polling data is historically flawed, and I had to remind myself that when Herschel Walker came back out with closing the gap and taking a little bit of a lead on some of these polls. And I had to remind myself that Herschel Walker's not a bad candidate. It's just, people are not going to answer their phone. People don't identify themselves as conservative on the phone to a pollster. They're not going to identify themselves out in public as that either because of the way the country is going. So when you have polling data like Quinnipiac, Monmouth, Trafalgar, you can go through it, Rasmussen. These guys are not going to get really good, clear sample size. That's not going to matter. It's not going to really equate to anything. So I think me and you both forgot about this, but Warnock spent a boatload of cash already in that race on media.
It's all out of state. It's all out of state dark money. It's all
he
a
spent
lot of money.
$30 million on media buys already. I'm like, and I hate to say this, but Herschel Walker's barely spent a third of that. So I can only imagine once the war chest gets opened up, and which it will, going in, I say about a month out, you're going to start seeing every TV campaign ad you can think of. I think even your state, North Carolina, you're going to see some. And my state in Texas, unfortunately, I'm already seeing them now. It's just, I like my Congresswoman Beth Van Dyne for re-election. I'll say that nicely. I met her many times. She's a very good person, and hopefully she stays my Congresswoman. But as you say, I live in a liberal county, so as you say, demographics change everything. But we do want to talk about Pennsylvania. I think I want to hear your opinion on this. Is Dr. Oz? I think you see on Twitter, man, like Dr. Oz gets just lambasted. Every conservative Twitter account just lambasts him. But he's keep your enemies that you want to know, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at Dr. Oz, I mean, I think we talked about offline last week. I mean, Dr. Oz was not I don't believe he was when you look at it from an America First standpoint. I strictly look at these candidates from an America First standpoint. I think when you look at a guy like Dr. Oz, he was not the original choice. Sean Parnell was really the handpicked choice of who Trump was going to endorse. I think if he was running, this would be a landslide. I think he'd win by 6 to 7, maybe 8 points with the national environment up there. But obviously it was kind of a messy primary there between him and McCormick and Kathy Barnett, who was the third person who jumped in, made a late run in the race, and then obviously the voting tallies and all that. It was clearly a mess up there in Pennsylvania, kind of definitely embarrassing. I mean, when you look at Fetterman, he's a joke. I mean, the guy's 45 years old, never had a job. He tries to do this whole, I'm a working man. He comes out of his mommy and daddy's basement, puts on his Carhartt, walks around like he's some type of, big strong guy. I mean, the guy's a fraud. But you have to look at it from the perspective of can Oz, can Oz turn out in these red counties and keep it closer in the Philly suburbs, the Pittsburgh suburbs. Again, I'll always tend to lean towards that because that's going to be where elections are won. I got to give Oz credit. I was not super impressed when his campaign first started after he got the nomination, but I've been a little surprised. I think I've seen him. He's been out there throwing some punches and per se, and trying to, I think he played kind of, soft, touchy feely for a little while, but I feel like now his campaign's starting to kind of take a turn. And some of the more prominent conservative, pundits are definitely jumping behind him here. Again, we no candidate's going to be perfect. There's not very many Ron DeSantis. There's not very many, you name them, who are solid, America first, want to move the country in the right direction. There's going to be some who are a little questionable, but we have to. It's either do you either go with a questionable guy or do you go with a full blown communist who wants to empty the jails out? So, people of Pennsylvania, you got to, I think we don't know what Oz will do. We got to get him in first, and then from there, we have to hold him accountable. That's the good thing about our elections is that, in 2 years in the House and then 6 years in the Senate, we can make those changes. But for now, the most important thing is we've got to hold that seat. We can't allow a full blown communist um, to be a representative in the Senate for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
I think I agree with you 100%. I think Fetterman, in my opinion, the difference between, I guess, most states, I'm not really interested in what like the blue states do when it comes to debate topics with conservatives, but with us, when it comes to watching, I would say up in the air or battleground states, you see, like in this case, Trump is going to do some serious barnstorming up there. He is. There's no doubt about it. I think Trump is going to have Oz. We're going to do a lot of campaign ads up there. I think they're going to do a lot of campaign ads in Georgia, especially. I think is going to be the two big ones. They're going to have to do a lot of campaign ads. I'm not talking about Trump ads. I'm talking about Oz has to play out the narrative why Fetterman is not the solution. And I think what he already has started to do, if you actually watch some of his interviews, especially on our favorite network, I wouldn't say that nicely, but hopefully Sean Hannity's not repeating himself at 825, but he probably is. But if he plays out the narrative of why Fetterman's not the solution for Pennsylvania, which I think he's starting to do in a pretty much, like you said, a counterpunch, not so touchy-feely way, he can win this. I think you're right about the Philadelphia situation, the cities, but I think a lot of people have been affected by the economy, especially in Pennsylvania. I'll say it. I think we live in two different states that I know our roots. Our roots are up in the East Coast, and let me tell you, it's a way worse scenario up there than it is back where we are when it comes to inflation and the economic situation. We don't work in tech. We don't work in tech. We don't have the luxury of working from home. I mean, some of us do. I'm not going to comment about my stuff, but we don't have that luxury. We got to do our thing. And a lot of people in the Rust Belt, as they call it, are being affected heavily. I think Oz needs to get away from just the personal. I think at some point you're going to have to get away from that debate schedule, which I think he needs to go debate him. Because every time you see Fetterman on camera, I think, Chris, you can probably say it here, that man is more incoherent than Sippy Cup.
Oh yeah, I mean, again, we're not trying to rip on someone who's had a stroke by no means, but the fact of the matter is,
then
if
he can't do the job, then he needs to step aside
exactly
and not run.
Yeah, we're not asking. This isn't tiddlywinks here. We're trying to got a person here who potentially could be shaping policy to either move our country forward or continue to move it backwards that we've seen over the last almost 2 years. So, people in Pennsylvania, if you're listening out to us, please get out there and vote. Please get out there and vote. Your vote matters more. Any of these states, doesn't matter um, if you're a Republican living in California, New York, Illinois. We know you guys are severely outnumbered. You got to get out and vote. I think that the national environment.
I think the national environment, yeah, but I think on a local level, even more
Yep.
so, especially on these school boards. I'm actually was excited, which me and you can discuss more about the school board stuff at another episode. But the school board elections in Florida got me more excited because it shows that people are back to being invested in their kids' education.
Yeah, I think the pandemic and remote learning and people really seeing what their kids are learning. Again, obviously, we could touch on more in our episode, but yeah, as the old saying goes, all politics are local, and I think that's where people need to understand that while the presidency is important, while the Senate and Congress is important, county commissioner, school board, all those different things, they affect your life more on a daily basis than what happens in Washington, D.C. Not saying Washington, D.C. doesn't affect it, because it does, but from a local standpoint, that's where sheriff, I think, and we could talk more about that in another episode too. I mean,
Yeah, we both live in county. I mean, I live in a county system here in Texas, obviously, and I'm pretty sure yours is close to it, if not the same as in North Carolina. I would say not as large as here, but it's definitely worth talking about another episode for sure.
Yeah. I think, and again, not getting off the topic of what we're discussing, but I think that could be an episode just talking about it, is where you live is extremely important. Not from an education standpoint, but for example, if you're a gun enthusiast, you're a gun owner, and you're trying to get a concealed carry permit, if your state doesn't have constitutional carry, you have to. If you have a good sheriff who abides by his role of upholding the Constitution and making sure he's not violating the rights of his or her citizens, as it comes to the Second Amendment. It's very, very important. Honestly, that's why the county I live in, I will not move to the area around the Charlotte metro, or in the Charlotte area, because the sheriff there is a lunatic, and it took him. He actually was sued. I know we're getting off topic, but he actually was sued by some gun rights groups here in the state of North Carolina, because he was holding up the permitting process during the height of the pandemic. But again, it could be a topic.
I think we can also discuss our home state there, and it's been a challenge even for people in that state as well, and it still blows me away how long things can take to get processed, especially on a simplistic, many of us can easily get a concealed handgun permit, and the process of doing it's not, other than taking the class and going through that. The fingerprinting process is pretty straightforward. It's a 5 to 10 minute process, but people want to, and we will talk about it later, I'll say it, the pandemic itself, the way it was handled. I think everyone needs to have a learning, kind of look at the mirror and kind of say what we learned and what we didn't learn, and how do we get better from it. Because a lot of this stuff, especially the kids, like I told you a long time ago, man, the kids unfortunately got the raw end of the deal, and it's unfortunate. Not everybody has the privilege to take their kids to private and parochial schools, and public education, which I have spent most of my time in, rings the burden. Imagine, I don't think we talked about that between the two of us. The kids, especially, public schools, man. Like we grew up where you laughed at me at this one. When we had to use our cell phones in class in high school, it was a big to do with the T9 text. Everybody was using a Razor phone. You can laugh at me on this one later, but it was literally like a to do to use your phone. Now, people have earbuds in their ears in class. I've seen videos. I can only imagine back when we were in school, man, we would get the crap kicked out of us for that kind of stuff. But
exactly. Different time, almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, showing our ages, man. But I think it's just different, man. And unfortunately, I think everybody learns different too, and I understand that. I'm not going to discredit people for learning. Some people are more hands-on than others, and I get that. But I think another race that I want to kind of discuss more than anything is really is Arizona, and I think a lot of us forget. Other than name recognition, Kelly is a leftist upon leftist. He really is. His wife, obviously, Congresswoman Giffords got, shot. And I understand his stance on gun rights. I understand his stance on that to a certain extent. Do I agree with it? No. But do I understand his view on why he carries it? Sure. But the one thing that I think he's forgetting is that Arizona, which we can talk about ad nauseum, is that Arizona's election in 2020 was just terrible. They're still calling it back right now. There's lawsuits upon lawsuits. I mean, if I was a lawyer in election law, I'd be making a killing right now. But Senator Kelly, in my opinion, has something that, other than name recognition and serving the government as an astronaut, he's a leftist. That's what he is. Now, the candidate we, as the GOP, have nominated to go against him, I'm not saying
Blake
he's a
Masters.
squish. Yeah, I don't think he's a squish, but he's not out there like, I think he's okay, but I guess I'm so used to Trump just beating the club out of everybody in elections. So I guess I'm used to that attacking.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a concern about Blake Masters was the charisma standpoint, and I've watched some of his videos and stuff, and I think he's starting to come within his own. I think he's solid on all the issues, both from a social standpoint and also from a fiscal standpoint. I think he would be a good leader for Arizona. Again, I look at always look at things from a demographic standpoint of how the state is. I mean, the state's moving to the left. You're seeing a lot of people coming over from California to Arizona because obviously it's cheaper cost of living. When and then obviously the big thing is Maricopa County, which is the base of the Phoenix area, and it's a huge county. Maricopa County and then Pima County, which is the Mesa area, or sorry, the Tucson area. Those are the two big counties there that obviously Masters has to do well. Masters is from Pima County, so I think just with that he'll do better. Maricopa still is going to be an uphill battle because of obviously the Phoenix metro area. But when I look at Arizona, I think Arizona is kind of interesting because obviously it's, and I'll use this term. You may agree or disagree, but Arizona's kind of been a neocon state for a long time. You had to kind of proverbially kiss the ring of the McCain family for so long, and I think
that is a good one right there, my friend. You better keep that one for later.
Yeah, when you look at the way Arizona has moved, with kind of the neocon rhino, the Jeff Flakes of the world. Obviously, you had John McCain. Again, we don't criticize the man for his service to our country, but his voting record, especially towards the end of his life in the Senate, was atrocious. But we have to look at it from the perspective of how do we keep Arizona in play? We can't. Again, the GOP can't lose any more states. When we look at a national election, and Sean Hannity's talked about it so much, the GOP is, I won't say is fighting for its life, but when you look at, I mean, the GOP you're starting in a hole. I mean, you have to look at it from this perspective. And again, I know I'm getting away from the Senate, but looking more towards the Electoral College, but you figure California's gone, New York is gone, Illinois is gone. You have three very large states with a lot of electoral votes that are gone off the top. So you have to hold Texas. You have to hold Tennessee. You got to carry North Carolina. You have to carry Florida. You have to carry Ohio. That's my concern, is that we cannot continue to allow these states to continue to move in that leftward direction, because long term it'll get harder and harder for us to win. So with that being said, I really do think I think Blake Masters is the right fit for Arizona. I think the national environment itself. I mean, when you look at the past, again, we've talked about Jeff Flake was horrible. Obviously, it's why he's not in the Senate anymore. But Martha McSally was a disaster. Doug Ducey, the governor of the current governor of Arizona, basically put her up in John McCain's seat, and then she lost the first time to Sinema, and then she lost again. So when you look at two states, in particular Arizona and Georgia, I mean, you had two really bad candidates in McSally and then Kelly Loeffler. Loeffler was appointed by Brian Kemp, who unfortunately didn't put Doug Collins in. Doug Collins would have been a phenomenal senator for the state of Georgia, but that's and I think there's a bevy of truth to what Mitch McConnell says that candidates do matter. Now, obviously, Mitch McConnell wants candidates that will stay in line with him. But it is true. You have to have candidates who have charisma, who have that appeal that a Trump has to the working class. You can't have people like Kelly Loeffler, who was in on insider trading. We have a terrible senator here in North Carolina, Richard Burr. He was in on the whole insider trading thing. When you
We
have
also have a Speaker of the House that her husband's gotten away with it like I don't know 4 dozen times.
Exactly. But again, we know we know that Democrats they can do whatever they want and it's no big deal to them. But if a GOP representative or senator does something out of line, they're page 6 and
we know
above the 8-fold.
We know it's a beautiful thing. We know it like it's the rules for thee, but not for me, right? That's the saying, and that's or as Nancy Pelosi would say, in order to pass, you have to vote on it to read it. Back in the day with the Affordable Health Care Act. Believe me, this story can go on for days, but I think you're right with the GOP. They made a terrible decision with Martha McSally, and listen. I don't have a hatred towards Sinema. I think Sinema was just Sinema's showing her where she's not genuflecting, but she knows she's
trying to be a moderate. But we know if the Democrats had a supermajority in the Senate, she would be voting as far left as any of them. There is no the days of the so-called blue dog Democrats; those are gone.
I disagree, but I agree at the same time because I think there is guys out there.
I don't see it.
We don't see them now because it's not the news of the day. But when it comes to like serious issues, like I would say the Dreamers Act, you see legitimate reform when it comes to certain issues. The Blue Dogs kind of stay in the background, and they let these liberals and these hard left guys kind of go out to town. But all the work gets done by a lot of the people behind the scenes that are not on the news stories which, by the way, if you ever noticed, Chris, that a lot of the same 6 or 7 senators are on television all the time. Ted Cruz, which, by the way, John Kennedy is a national treasure. Lindsey Graham, which, by the way, Lindsey Graham needs to get the hell off Fox, his damn turncoat. Damn smooge. But yeah, John Kennedy, in my opinion, from the great state of Louisiana, is a national treasure. I wish I had the one-liners that man had.
My favorite was Lindsay Lohan and giving Lindsay Lohan the keys to the Benny bar. That was probably his.
That's the good one right there. But I think going back to Arizona, I genuinely believe that if Masters doesn't hammer Kelly on the border, I mean not just like hammer him a couple times, like poke him. I mean, you got to club him like a baby seal. Because he's voted to the left on every border policy. He's not calling out Joe Biden to come to the border. And I think the border issue, I obviously live in Texas. And but maybe you should use the Greg Abbott playbook and start busting some people to some of these liberal cities.
They've turned every state in the union into 48 a based on a border state. Every state here is a border state.
Well, and I hate to say it to everybody, but it is, okay? Because the way the border policy with Joe Biden is we're going to move you around the country after you get here. So they're not just staying in Texas and making my state blue. No, unfortunately, I have people from California that, think they're whatever doesn't smell bad, and they come here and they think everything is whatever, and they just mess up the policies locally. Just saying. That being said, unfortunately, Greg Abbott, in my personal view, has done a great job of trolling the living daylights out of Joe Biden. Done a nice job. I don't think it's a troll, by the way. I think it's it's not a PR stunt, but I think it's legit a good move. You're busing maybe 1/3, not even, a tenth of what we get on a daily basis here on the border to liberal cities like Chicago, New York City, Baltimore. Keep it going. Hell, send them to California too.
But why hasn't? But here's my playing devil's advocate. Why hasn't Greg Abbott declared an emergency?
He has.
An invasion.
Who do you think securing the border right now? We as taxpayers in the state of Texas are paying for that border security right now. We've actually, the National Guard are on rotation right now. They're on a 6-month rotation. There's 3 deployments down there right now, and how I know that because I have bartender friends that are National Guard, and they are deployed. So
and what do we do? And what do we do? What are we doing with these people? I mean, are we?
Well, they're helping out. They're helping out Border Patrol because they're understaffed. I'll hate to say this, but they're overrun.
Absolutely, there's no doubt about it.
And
but what are we? But what are we doing with these people? That's my question. If these people come across, we process them. Where are they going? Are we
right
sending
now
them back?
they're getting on a bus to go to a liberal city so they can make it up there instead of
Yeah,
coming.
but that's my concern is that we're not okay. They're catching these people and they're only catching a small fraction of them, but we're not. It's not like we're telling them, all right, go turn around and take them and send them back. We're just saying, all right, we're processing you. You'll get this court date that nobody shows up to, and
this is where living here kind of helps me a little bit. Is the policy of the border policy under the Trump administration was a way different policy fundamentally at its core. It wasn't like a heinous, we're going to put you in cages. We're not, listen, everybody can sit there and make that judgment call and be a blowhard all they want.
Which cages were built by Obama.
Exactly. That's why I wasn't going to even bring that up. But at the same time, people that are paying attention understand that, they're the boys that cry wolf all the time. And that's what the liberals are. And give me a better policy. That's what Trump was saying to you. Give me a better policy. Give me something better than what I was doing that's going to be better off for the entire country. And unfortunately, when it comes to immigration, other than the Dreamers Act, which it's a hard negotiation topic, it really is. If you look at the hard stance of the Republican Party and you look at the hard stance of the left, they're at impasse. They're at two sides of the room when it comes to this issue.
Yeah, the Dreamers Act was unconstitutional.
I understand that. But I'm saying to you is you have to kind of bridge the gap somewhere, right, when it comes to the Dreamers Act. And not to get away from the Senate race, but in my opinion, Masters needs to come out with something that is close, if not borderline the same as Trump's policy on the border. But it's also going to, because you have to talk about long-term solutions. Because I hate to say this, but the Keep in Mexico policy worked during COVID because you declared a national emergency, right? That's another topic for another day, and I really can care less about what people think about COVID. I'm sorry, but it's a case of the sniffles right now. If you get COVID right now, no one's dying from it right now. People are on a wide-scale basis. Let me tell you, there might be some isolated cases of people dying from it that have some pre-COVID mobilities or whatever. But right now, it's not as big as a prevalence as it is back when we first started this thing. So the Keep in Mexico policy worked. It worked great. The Mexico government worked alongside our government, and everybody was happy. Now you have a campaign right now for Senate with Kelly's going to be like, yeah, we'll just keep doing the same status quo. It's not going to work. If Masters and the National Party doesn't clobber Kelly, ad-wise, media-wise, debate, whatever, you got to hammer. I'm not sure the job scenarios in Phoenix, Arizona, and Maricopa. I'm not sure the jobs market in the counties in Arizona, but you got to talk about the economy. The economy has got to be the number one issue going into this election. I understand gas prices, which I'm not sure the gas prices near you right now, Chris, but mine below fell $3 a gallon today. First time in over a year. So.
But then you wonder how the heck these gas prices suddenly drop.
Well, I personally don't believe that it's going to stay that way because OPEC just announced that they're slowing down production.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think it's just a short-term, 6-week kind of drawdown, and that's for the election. I said it. I'll say it again. It's for the election. It's kind of playing games. Biden is nothing more than a fearmonger. He makes George W. Bush look like a saint when it comes to fearmongering, and he wants to divide the country. He accused Trump of dividing the country, man. I'll say it. I'll go scorched earth on Biden if I want. When it comes to political views, it's literally that speech that he did absolutely nothing, other than piss off a lot of people. Which, by the way, the silent majority has to vote. You talk about get out the vote. The silent majority went back to being silent after Trump lost. You know why? Because we were getting demagogued by the leader of the free world about how bad we are over January 6th, which, by the way, there's news coming out about that every day.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that hearing, which I'll talk about the Senate. We're going to talk about the Senate in 22. Biden's going to get impeached. I'll call it right here. That's my hot take of the day. Trump, not saying Trump got impeached twice by party because of the vote swing in the House. There's already articles of impeachment by 15 different GOP congresspeople.
MTG leading the charge.
MTG, Lauren Boebert, a lot of them are jumping on board. Let me tell you something. I'm actually more upset. I know we're talking about the Senate here, but I'm more upset that Kevin McCarthy is considered to be the Speaker of the House over Steve Scalise. That's just me.
I think that's one of the problems. I think it's one of the problems with the GOP, and why again, we go back.
Well, who else? In the Senate, Chris, who else are you going to have in the Senate besides I call Mr. Magoo? I mean, who else are you going to have? I mean, who else is there? Ted Cruz?
Yeah.
Who else?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the that's one of the problems with the GOP. I mean, you look at you just kind of go down the list of senators. I mean, there's a lot of squishy Republicans. I mean, you'd probably put Cruz near the top of the somewhat reliable, but not always reliable. But when you look at just go state by state. I mean, I'll start here and say I live in North Carolina. We got two lousy senators. We had our last election cycle here, we had to basically plug our nose and vote for Tom Tillis. So Richard Burr obviously is retiring. He was a disaster. I mean, below us here in South Carolina, you got Lindsey Graham, who we won't even waste our time talking about, and you got
good old Tim Scott, man. Which,
Tim
by the way,
Tim Scott's been disappointing.
Yep,
if you look at it, there's a lot of mediocre senators from the Republican side. I mean, and the leadership's old. I mean, you look at McConnell, he's ancient. Cornyn, Thune, that Inhofe. I mean,
I'll say, speaking of Cornyn, I won't even go down that road.
Yeah, don't waste our time.
It's a waste of time, but he's going to retire next go around anyway.
Oh, I mean, he's done. He's finished. I mean, he burned his political capital with pushing that bill. So that's the problem for the Republican Party is and I even think about it as a registered Republican. It's like, okay, we get the House and the Senate back. Great. We can thwart somewhat of this radical agenda, and at least hold the country for hopefully 2 more years until we can get Trump or DeSantis, whoever's going to run, back in the White House and hopefully turn everything back around again, get back going in the right direction. But the problem is like, I mean,
this is where this great conversation will continue for the next 6 weeks.
Yeah,
and really does, because at the end of the day, you're right. You're 100% right. We win back the House by whatever margin that it is. Okay, it happens every 2 years, by the way, for all you people listening at home. The pendulum swings one way or the other. Either we pick up more seats or we lose. But at the same time, and I mean this full-heartedly, all we do is take back the majority, and then we basically block every single thing that the liberals want to do. But then when we propose new legislation, unfortunately, old Sippy Cup has the good old veto power. So, and if the Senate, which we're talking about right now, is as closely as it is right now, we don't have the veto over, we can't overturn a veto. We're lucky. I don't know about you, Chris, but I think it's a 54, maybe 40, 46, maybe 44. I'm trying to think here. Yeah, it'd be 50,
Yeah.
50, 44 if we pick up 6 seats, which we didn't talk about. Another race, which I think I'll talk about here, is Las Vegas and Nevada. I think Nevada is slowly turning red more and more. I think we can talk about that for the next 3 hours, but I'm not going to because we both have lives. But the one that's kind of discerning is Wisconsin. And this is the last one I want to talk about here because the national press, unfortunately, is railroading good old our candidate there, Mr. Johnson. And they're showing him up. They're showing him down by like 20 points in polls. And I don't know about you, but we both been to Wisconsin. And other than Milwaukee and Madison, that state's redder than red in the suburbs. So, does Johnson hold on to the seat? I hope so.
Yeah, we hope. I mean, he was on Mark Levin. I was listening over the weekend, and he kind of was making a point of and that he's being out. I mean, which again, all of our Republican candidates are being outspent probably 2-3 times. Tons of dark money, out of state money, mostly coming from California. These hardcore leftists, some of these big tech overlords here who want to control our lives. I mean, they've got unlimited budgets. They can spend as much as they want. Our candidates, a lot of them are either not heavily funded or a lot of small donors. So I mean that's money. As you know, money is king in politics, unfortunately. Whether it's the presidency or the Senate, as we talked about in this episode, or local elections, money is king. Money is king in politics. So I mean, I think Wisconsin has been moving to the right. I think that they are hopefully going to get a Republican governor back in there after having Tony Evers here after he beat Scott Walker in 2018. So, Wisconsin, I think at one time was seen as kind of fool's gold for a Republican to win. And obviously Trump did in 2016. So, we hope that, and I think that'll be a place that you'll probably see Trump show up. And Ron Johnson's been a staunch ally of President Trump, and I think you'll see him out there.
And I think I'm not sure if you know the area well, but where Trump did one of his rallies in Wisconsin was Waukesha, which is where I usually travel for work. And it's actually he is well supported in those suburban counties of Milwaukee. I think Trump is Trump, but we'll close it out with this. Trump's got to kind of kick up the engines of Trump Force One and start going to campaign. Which one thing I think we both have seen, that one man can draw an audience, and there's no man like Donald Trump when it comes to drawing an audience, and that's for sure. And really, old Sippy Cup can really draw 100 people in Pennsylvania. And unfortunately, if Trump doesn't campaign hard for these candidates, not saying there's a side of me that says if Trump doesn't go out there and campaign, these candidates will have more airtime, and that they might get the issues across, like the economy, border security, et cetera, inflation, across to the voter, and everyone will stop focusing on Trump. Not saying there's a negative connotation with him, but a lot of people, ever since this Mar-a-Lago thing, there's kind of this big old weight that's on him. It's like it's weighing them down. And, I think they got their mission accomplished on that situation, I'll say that they want to weigh him down so the Senate stays one way. But at the same time, the House is divided in this country, or the government's divided legislatively. Nothing's going to get done anyway. So, unfortunately, we as the American people, and I'll close it out with this, we as the American people are going to fall victim to a government that is basically, and I'll say this in the most nicest terms possible, incompetent from top to bottom. Okay, the President of the United States, the Vice President of the United States, his cabinet have failed the American people. Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Health and Human Services, all of it have failed the American people. Secretary of Education, all the way up to the top, Joe Biden, DOJ, Attorney General of the United States. They've all failed the United States people, the citizens of this great country, based on their conduct. And unfortunately, we as the American people have to be the victims of incompetency in government. Not them, because after this is over with, whatever term of government they have, they'll go back to their nice houses, mansions that they have. Joe Biden might be selling off his status to China and Ukraine, for all we know. Hunter Biden might come out and do some more ads. I don't know. Who knows? But at the end of the day, like I will tell this 1 million people across this country, we as the American people pay taxes every year to vote for competency. And unfortunately, we voted the right way. We voted for a man that puts policy and government like a business. That's what we wanted. We wanted a man in 2020 to do exactly what he said he was going to do in 2016. That's the end of it. And guess what? We did. Unfortunately, I'm not going to go down the election denier situation. I'm not doing that. I'm not going that way. I'm not doing it. Because the GOP dropped the ball. The GOP, unfortunately, cannot drop the ball this time. Because if we continually drop the ball, as my co-host has said, we lose the country. When we lose the country, all things are open. Court packing. We're going to go down that terrible road. So that being said, guys, I want to thank everyone for joining in. Chris, I appreciate you joining me on this episode. And feel free to join us on social media. You can join me at Yankee Cowboy 27 on Twitter. Our website will be posted on the link below. We also do have a Patreon link as well. We're gonna have more episodes and talk about politics, Chris. I think we have a good scheme here. I think we can talk about almost anything in the world. We said we're gonna go a half hour. This is almost an hour, so we might need to do some editing. But overall, I think it's a good conversation to have, and I hope this furthers the conversation across the country. That's what this was all about. Was actually educating people, informing people about the issues of which we already know about. We live through them every day, but talk about them in a rational manner to our friends, to our colleagues, to our family, and hopefully everyone has a good, conversation, a good election cycle. Chris, thank you.
Thanks, man. Do it again next week.
Oh yeah, we'll do it again. All right. That was strong. It was a little long though.
Yeah. What did we time? What was the final time? Still there?
I'm still here. Sorry, man.
There you go.
Yeah, it's 50. You got 6.5 minutes on the front end to edit out, and I got about 30, almost a minute on the back end to cancel out. So it's like 53, 54 minutes.
Okay.
That's not terrible. I mean, I could have gone more, but I'm looking at the clock going, dude, we're both fucking way over the time.
Yeah, no, it's all good, man. It's all good. We'll tighten it up. So
I don't mind going long on certain topics like this. I don't mind going long on. It's the fucking sports topics that are gonna fucking drag me up a wall if you go long on those. Those are just fucking nauseating.
10-4, man.
But other than that, I don't know, man. Man, I would have. That one probably went a little. That was actually not a bad episode. I think I just I hate the sound Trumpian in a sense when it comes to conversational pieces, but it is what it is.
All good, man.
Hey, I'll give you a call here in a second. I'm going to hang this one up real quick.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. All right, man.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Yankee Cowboy Podcast. Feel free to join us on social media to continue these great conversations and more.